59 years. Dennis was 3 weeks old when I moved into this house. He was a new baby. This was a very, very happy, fun house. This was a fun house. We had kids were all active. They were into all kinds of sports. All my boys got along. All the children got along. I never allowed my kids to fight. They used to wrestle, but if there was any battling, it was stopped immediately. They had paper routes when they were like 5 or 6 years old. They all had paper routes. We had paper routes passed on for 10 years, 15 years. Morning paper routes, daily paper routes, Sunday paper routes. Anything to make $1. My boys, John, whom we call Jack, Paul, who we call Paul, Dennis, who we call Den, some of us called him Dennis, Timothy, who we call Tim, Richard, or Dick, we call Dick, Terrence, or Terry. So we got Jack, Paul, Dennis, Tim, Dick, and Terry, and Maureen was my daughter.
My first memories of Den was back, it was probably early, we had moved to Pawtucket, and from Providence we moved to Pawtucket and bought our house that you were at today. And it was early in the 50s because television had just come out. And we had this black and white television set, and it was in the den. And my brother, Paul, and I would be watching whatever was on TV. And Den would run in, and he'd turn off the TV, and he'd run out the room. And we'd chase him back into the kitchen, just to get us going. He liked to get us. And then he'd hide behind my mom. Mom would be washing the dishes, and he'd kind of sneak in between her, and he'd be peeking out at us. And we were also mad at him. And it was a long time ago,
Well, we were all great friends. Den was number 3, and I'm number 4 in the boys. So he was my oldest brother, next oldest brother. So we were matched up sometimes by roommates. So he was my roommate, and we shared the same bedroom sometimes. Sometimes 4 of us were in the same bedroom.
As a kid growing up, I don't know if you have any older brothers, but they get to beat you up as the pecking order goes, you know what I mean?
The family was, in a sense, divided between the 3 big boys and the 3 younger ones. So oftentimes, Dennis, as the third of the first 3, would be more or less responsible for looking after me, the youngest of the latter 3. So Jack kind of looked after Tim, Paul looked after Dick, and Dennis looked after me in many ways. So we were I suppose, closer in bond than some of the other brothers just by virtue of that. We had basically a non-stop wrestling match, but we were a tight-knit group. We didn't have a lot of money, but we were, very close-knit family, I guess. We worked together a lot. We had jobs that we started at young ages.
Growing up, we were paper boys. We were workers. Because my father delivered bread door to door, and my mother was a waitress at the donut shop. We had 7 kids. We all worked. We all worked from day one. We're in the garage. This is where the papers drop. The guy would drop the papers, and we each had a paper route. So we break them all up in here. There's a lot of life happened right here in the garage. So we were always working. If we weren't working, cleaning, delivering papers, we were picking up papers in the parking lot. We were paper picker-uppers, PPU. We had a job early mornings before school. We'd go over to the local shopping plaza over here, and we would pick up papers. We'd walk up and down the parking lot and pick up all the cigarette butts and empty all the trash cans, and it was a good job. It was a good job for kids.
He was quite a guy, I'll tell you. Dan was always a good student, and he was always an athletic kind of guy around the house. Always got like a basketball team going. We always had a net in the garage, and he was always ready to go. He always had a lot of energy, and he always wanted to do a lot of things. And He always had a lot of friends, and he was always a good guy. He was always fun to hang out with, you know what I mean?
He and his friend were going down to the Newport Jazz Festival. Now this is late 60s, and you know the riots hadn't happened yet down at the festivals, and they were very much a scene where all kids in that age bracket wanted to be in Newport for the festivals. And so even if you didn't have a ticket, that was the place to go down and just hang around. And so he and his friend were driving down to Newport for the day to make the scene, and he, you know, invited me to come along. There's a two-seater car now, but he said, you know, he thought nothing of saying, you know, hop in, squeeze between the two of us. Drove down to the festival, and it was a real eye-opener for me. You know, the whole kind of a hippie scene going on with the musicians playing on the beach and just hundreds of college kids, you know, dancing and partying on the beach during the day. And I always felt it was, you know, very nice of him to include me in something like that. I can still, in my mind, remember the moments of, you know, stopping for a mile-long hot dog on the ride home, and just feeling like I wasn't a bother, that I was, you know, he was happy to have me along. So that would be sort of a typical of the way he dealt with me as a younger brother.
Anyway, after St. Ray's, we did well, and he went on to Providence College, and it was really good for him. And he did well. He hung out a lot with my brother Paul at that point. Paul and Den, you know, drove to school together, and they always talk about the junk cars that we used to have. You know, kids, we'd have to push the car down the street and jump start it. We never had batteries; were always dead. And the windshield wipers, I'll never forget, the windshield wipers, they had a string tied to the windshield wipers, so on rainy days we'd run through the center of the Paul would drive, and then would work the string like this to keep the windshield wipers going. And anyway, you had to be there. But those were the days, my friend.
He really, I think, reached for the stars, if you will, sought after things that the rest of us thought were not obtainable from our socioeconomic background. His decision to forsake the summer job in the cotton factories, like many of the rest of us did, and he somehow made it over to Europe and traveled around to London, Madrid, Paris, Dublin. So those were things that the rest of us really never thought of as being within our reach, and that would be typical of the way he went about his life. When it came to the military service, my brother Jack simply enlisted in the military. When it came Dennis's turn, he was not going to just be an enlisted member of the armed forces. Instead, he signed up for ROTC, and when he went into the Army, he went in as an officer, as a second lieutenant.
So he breezed through St. Ray's and then went on to Providence College, and I think the thing that really got him at Providence College was he wanted to go in order to pay his way through school, because we didn't really have any money, so we all had to kind of work our way through. And that's when he joined the Reserve Officer Training Corps, the ROTC group. And he took a lot of pride in that, you know, the uniform, and became a second lieutenant in the Army Reserves just before he came out of school, and that was very important to him. You know, he looked good, he looked sharp, and he was going to do his things.
He was a second lieutenant. When you're a second lieutenant, you're the guy they push out in front. You go get shot, college boy. You get out there, take the lead. Next stop, Vietnam. Go there, and they're sending everybody over, and he's delaying, because he got one excuse to another excuse. All the delays are out. You're going. The day before he's supposed to go, Henry Kissinger, we hated, announces that Nixon is stopping. And so he was one day away from going. By getting ready to go, they prepped him that he went through intense training as if you were there.
His friends, his best friends that he used to drink with, told me that after he went to basic training, they said he was never the same after that.
We always wondered about that training, that conditioning, about him talking about being out in the woods at night, during the training, like how realistic it was, how scary it was?
Well, Dennis and Helen met the night of our rehearsal dinner, just before the night that we got married. And Helen and the whole family came out from Michigan. And I don't know if it was love at first sight or what, but next thing you know, at the wedding, they're just dancing by, and they're all bubbles, and they're, you know, it was like they're going to be a couple forever. You just knew that, you know.
I met Dennis at my sister Pat and Dennis's brother John's wedding, and they had 6 boys, and we had 5 girls, so the house in Rhode Island was packed with all of us, and Dennis and I just really clicked at the wedding, and we both liked to dance. We had a lot of things in common. We both liked to have fun, and he was always the life of the party. We kept communicating for probably about 6 months, and he moved out to California to be with me, and we had a lot of fun out there. It was a great time to be in California. This was in 1973, and we saw a lot of groups. We went to concerts. We enjoyed LA. We traveled. We went to the mountains, down to the beaches. We had a lot of fun in California, and he was always a great one to have at a party, because he was always the life of the party. Actually, one of my girlfriends let us stay in her place it was a townhouse. We were out there for my other sister's wedding, and Dennis thought that the place was bugged, so he would he turned the music way up, and then he started screaming things at me, telling me actually a lot of not good things about what he had been doing. So, but I was kind of torn at that time between. I knew he wasn't right, and the infidelities that he was telling me about were not a good thing to hear. Not at that time, but I knew I had to take care of him. I knew I had to get him help, and so we flew back to try and get him some help. And when he got on the plane, he was very agitated, and he couldn't sit still, and he couldn't sit with me because he said that I was shooting lightning bolts from my eyes. Oh, and I was just kind of crouching in my seat and hoping that we would just get there. And because I figured when we got to Massachusetts, his brother Terry and his friend George were going to be waiting at the airport for us, and I just wanted to get him there.
And she basically called to say Dennis has snapped. And it was very shocking and devastating news. And we did drive up there that night, dropped everything, went right up, picked him up. And I can recall on the way home him, looking out the back window, thinking people were following us. He stayed that night at my mom's house. That next day he went and talked with the family physician, this guy, Dr. Butler. And I think the doctor recognized some signs here. I do have a recollection of sitting around the kitchen table trying to convince him that it was in his best interest to do that. And I think he did rely heavily on my advice. It maybe goes back to how close we were growing up. I explained how he was the third in the chain and I was the 6th, and he had certain responsibilities for me, and we bonded as a result of that. So I think he did respect my advice, if you will. So I'm pretty sure it was me that convinced him with others sitting around the table, but that he should trust our judgment, that his judgment was diminished at the time, and that he should trust our judgment that he did need to go and get hospitalized.
We took him to the hospital at that point, and the only way they would admit him is if I would say that he was a danger to me. And so I put off doing that for a long time, but we had gotten to the point where I had to say that he was threatening, which he actually was, and and that he was a danger to me and himself. And we did get him committed.
I mean, I remember being surprised myself the first time he actually went into an institution for, no, I was like, you're kidding. I had no idea.
Things get bad. Manic depressive, that I felt that I could help him. I could change him. If we worked together, if he stayed on his medicine and all this, that it would always be okay. Really the worst of it.
And that's when, it wasn't just kidding around anymore. He was really locked into a ward in a hospital, into a locked ward, you know what I mean? And, you're trying to be cheerful and friendly and everything, but still, it's a scary thing,
And so once he went into Butler Hospital, from that point on, now you got a big label on your back, you're like, you're one of those guys, you've been in an institution. From that point on, you're never going to get over it. You're never going to, because now all the stigmas that everyone puts on you, whether you deserve it or not. So from that point on, now you're kind of like, oh, he's got a problem. Didn't know before you went in, but now obviously he's got it because he was in, so.
They said that a lot of times with manic depressive behavior, it's seasonal. And it seemed like fall was his season. He would start getting, I could tell when he would escalate. And I knew his medications very well, so I knew just what he needed to take when, I knew I knew just the signs. I could tell just if he would be a little agitated, start talking to me in a disrespectful way. I just knew when it was happening, and I'd always make sure that, are you taking your medicine? And then I started counting his pills to make sure that he was taking them, because he would always tell me he was when he wasn't. And once somebody who's manic depressive gets over the line kind of and into the mania side of the illness, they don't want to stop, because it's fun. It's a ride. It's the mania. He loved it. He loved being in control and in power, because it made him feel very powerful.
If he would go off the medication, he would start screaming out the window of his apartment at people going by, and he would get unruly.
Much more ahead. A Pawtucket man is hauled away by police, all because he allegedly threatened the government, and President Clinton will have details.
Wouldn't you think that if you were in a well-respected institution for handling mental illness, with doctors and nurses and medical folks of all sorts around you, wouldn't you think you'd probably be safe? No, of course not. So he decides, I've had enough of this. I'm getting the hell out of here. Walks out. Wait a minute. You're supposed to be a patient in like a lockdown ward or something. I don't know how the hell you get out. He just walks out. And they don't know it. They don't know that he's supposed to be in Butler Hospital, but he just walks out the door.
He was hanging around with this neighbor, and they would listen to Rush Limbaugh all day and get all stirred up. And he knew the chain of command from his military experience, and he called the National Guard and told them to arrest President Clinton and come pick him up. And he gave his address, and he would tell him what to do next.
Not that he didn't like Clinton. He voted for Clinton. It's just that he thought he could do it better. So he wanted to be put in charge. And so they didn't send the Army didn't send any car. They called the cops, and they said, the cops, you got a guy over there you better go get. So the cops, they don't know who they're dealing with, so they sent like a SWAT team. I wasn't here. They came to this house, and they surrounded the house, and they stopped all the traffic, and they came in and they got him. And it was kind of sad, because he was embarrassed himself, and embarrassed my mother, and it's like, geez.
Federal agents are trying to strengthen their case tonight against the local man who allegedly threatened the president. Police and Secret Service dragged 45-year-old Dennis Tierney out of his Pawtucket home today. Tierney allegedly made threats against the United States government.
At the present time, the investigation shows he meant no physical harm to the President of the United States. But because of differing philosophies, he wanted to be in charge of a takeover of military contingents as well as installations in the United States.
But a federal law enforcement source tells Channel 12 tonight that Tierney called an Army friend and actually threatened President Clinton's life. Apparently, Tierney is also a runaway from Butler Hospital in Providence. Police say with the recent attacks around the country, they're not taking any chances.
And I think that got him a short stay in the nut house. But he, after that, they put him on lithium. I believe it was 1,200 milligrams of lithium a day to basically silence him or drug him or whatever results, whatever lithium does to you. That's what he was on for a long time.